The moment that destroyed my world came exactly 30 seconds after I sat down for breakfast. My son Clifford was smiling at me, signing, "I love you," with gentle hands. But his words hit me like a knife to the chest. "God, just hurry up and die," he muttered to his wife. "Once she's gone, we can sell this dump and finally be free." He thought I was still deaf. He didn't know I could hear every single lie. Quick question, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and subscribe. Ready for an amazing story? Let's begin. My world went quiet 5 years ago. It wasn't a gradual fade, like a radio losing signal as you drive out of the city. It was sudden. One minute I was driving to the grocery store on a Tuesday, and the next, a pickup truck ran a red light. I woke up in the hospital with a broken arm, a few cracked ribs, and a silence so heavy it felt like I was underwater. The doctors called it severe nerve damage. I called it a prison. For 5 years, I lived in that prison. I am Joan Todd. I've lived in this house in Denver for 40 years. I raised my son, Clifford, right here in these rooms. But since the accident, I became a guest in my own life. I learned to read lips, but people are impatient. They turn away while speaking, or they mumble. Eventually, you stop asking them to repeat themselves. You just nod and smile and pretend you understand. You become furniture, a lamp in the corner that everyone walks past. My son Clifford and his wife Kay moved in 2 years ago to help me. I was grateful. I really was. It's terrifying to be deaf and alone in a big house. I thought they were my angels. I thought they sacrificed their freedom to take care of a broken old woman. I loved them for it. I trusted them with everything, my schedule, my meals, my doctors. But today was different. I sat in the exam chair at the audiologist's office staring at Dr. Evans. He's a young man with a kind face. He had been writing back and forth with me on a notepad for weeks about a new clinical trial. It wasn't a surgery. I didn't want anyone cutting into me again. It was a device, a new type of hearing aid that sits deep in the canal, bypassing the damaged nerves and stimulating the ones that still worked. I didn't tell Clifford I was coming. He usually drives me everywhere, but today I wanted to do this alone. I didn't want to get his hopes up if it didn't work. I took a rideshare service, holding my purse tight on my lap. Dr. Evans held up a tiny device. It was smaller than a coffee bean. He placed it carefully into my left ear, then the right. He turned back to his computer and typed something. He held up a finger, signaling me to wait. Then he tapped a key. First, it was just static. Then a low hum. It was the sound of the air conditioner vent above my head. I gasped. It was the most beautiful noise I had ever heard. "Joan," Dr. Evans said. I didn't read his lips. I was looking at his tie. I heard him. His voice was deep and clear. "Joan, can you hear me?" Tears pricked my eyes instantly. "Yes," I whispered. My own voice sounded strange to me, rough from disuse. "I can hear you. I can hear the hum of the computer." "That's excellent," he smiled, and I heard the fabric of his lab coat rustle as he moved. "We need to calibrate the levels, but the nerve response is fantastic. How does it feel?" "It feels like I just woke up," I said. We spent an hour adjusting the settings. By the time I walked out of that office, I was a new woman. I could hear the traffic on the street. I could hear a dog barking 3 blocks away. I could hear the wind in the trees. The isolation was gone. I wasn't just a lamp in the corner anymore. I was Joan again. I ordered a rideshare home. The driver was a man named Ahmed. He asked me about the weather, and I answered him without looking at his face. We talked about the Broncos and the traffic on I-25. It was a simple, meaningless conversation, but to me, It was a miracle. I felt powerful. I felt young. All I could think about was Clifford, my sweet boy. He worried so much about me. He always looked so stressed when he had to write things down for me or mime out what he wanted to say. I couldn't wait to see his face. I was going to walk in the door and say, "Cliff, I can hear you." We would cry, we would hug, and maybe we would go out to dinner to celebrate. I planned to throw a big party for my birthday next week to tell everyone else, but Clifford had to know now. The car pulled up to my driveway. My house looked beautiful in the afternoon sun. The garden needed weeding, but I didn't care. I paid the driver and tipped him $20 just because I was so happy. I walked up the front path. I had my house key in my hand. Usually, I would ring the bell so they knew I was there, or I would slam the door a bit because I couldn't hear how loud I was being. But today, I could hear the click of the lock. It was smooth and quiet. I pushed the door open silently. The house smelled like roasted chicken. Kay must be cooking dinner. My stomach rumbled. I smiled, imagining their surprise. I stepped onto the plush carpet of the hallway, making no sound. I was about to call out Clifford's name when I heard voices coming from the kitchen. "It's just taking too long, Cliff," Kay said. I froze. Her voice wasn't muffled. It was sharp, clear, and dripping with annoyance. I stood there in the hallway, clutching my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Keep your voice down," Clifford said. His voice was lower, tired. "Why?" Kay laughed. "A cold, cruel sound. She's not here. And even if she walks in, she's deaf as a post. I could scream right in her face, and she wouldn't know." I felt cold. I should have walked in right then. I should have shouted, "I can hear you." But something stopped me. An instinct, the same instinct that tells you not to touch a hot stove. I stayed perfectly still, leaning slightly toward the kitchen doorway. "I know, Kay," Clifford said, "but she's my mother." "She's a burden, Clifford," Kay snapped. I heard a pot bang against the stove. "We've been living here for 2 years. 2 years of writing notes. 2 years of babysitting. I'm tired of it. We are stuck in this dusty old house while our friends are buying boats and traveling. This house is wasted on a deaf old woman who just sits in her chair all day." I stopped breathing. Is that what they thought? That I just sat there? I stayed out of their way because I thought I was helping. "The market is hot right now," Kay continued. "If we sell this place, we clear enough to pay off your debts and buy that condo in Florida. Plus, we'd have enough left over for the boat. We can't sell it while she's living here," Clifford said. "It's in her name." "That's why we need to speed up the power of attorney paperwork," Kay said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that my new hearing aids picked up perfectly. "Dr. Stevenson said if we can prove she's mentally declining, becoming confused, we can take control. A nursing home is better for her anyway. Professionals can deal with the lip reading." Clifford sighed. It was a long, heavy sigh. I waited for him to yell at her. I waited for him to say, "No, that's my mother. She raised me. She loves us." "I just don't want to look like the bad guy," Clifford said. "Make sure the nursing home is at least clean." "It's state-funded, Cliff." "It's fine," Kay said dismissively. "She won't know the difference. She lives in her own head anyway." My hand gripped the doorframe, so hard my knuckles turned white. My knees felt weak. The joy I had felt in the doctor's office 10 minutes ago vanished, replaced by a nausea that rolled through my stomach. My son, my Clifford, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I nursed through his divorce. He wasn't defending me. He was negotiating the terms of my disposal. They weren't taking care of me out of love. They were waiting out the clock. They were vultures circling a body that wasn't even dead yet. I wanted to burst into the kitchen and scream. I wanted to throw them out. But then a thought settled over me, cold and hard as steel. If I walked in there now and revealed I could hear, they would panic. They would lie. They would backtrack and say they didn't mean it, that they were just stressed. And because I loved them, I might be stupid enough to believe them. Or worse, they would know that I knew, and they would get smarter. They would hide their plans better. Right now, they thought I was the vulnerable, oblivious, deaf old woman. They thought they were invisible. I took a deep breath. I reached up and adjusted my hair to make sure it completely covered my ears and the tiny devices hidden inside. I wiped the single tear that had escaped my eye. I backed up to the front door, opened it again, and slammed it shut, hard. The vibration shook the wall. "She's home," I heard Kay hiss. "Smile, Cliff." I walked into the kitchen, wearing the same confused, gentle smile I had worn for 5 years. I looked at Kay, then at Clifford. Kay turned to me, smiling brightly, waving her hand. She mouthed the words big and slow, treating me like a toddler. HELLOJOEN. "Hi, Mom." Clifford waved, giving me a thumbs up. "Hello, dears," I said. My voice was steady. "It smells lovely in here." "I'm making your favorite," Kay shouted, exaggerating her facial expressions. But my hearing aids picked up what she muttered under her breath as she turned back to the stove. "Eat up, old bat. Enjoy it while it lasts." I walked to the table and sat down. I didn't say a word. I just watched them. For 5 years, I had been praying for a miracle. I got one, but it wasn't just my hearing. It was the truth. They thought the silence made me weak. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I picked up a napkin and placed it on my lap. The game had begun. I didn't sleep a wink that night. How could I? For the first time in 5 years, the house wasn't silent. I heard the refrigerator humming downstairs. I heard the wind rattling the loose pane in the guest room window. But mostly, I heard the echo of my son's voice saying he wanted to get rid of me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the tiny plastic devices in my ears. I should have taken them out to sleep, but I was terrified. I was terrified that if I took them out, the silence would come back and I'd wake up realizing this was all a dream. Or worse, that I'd take them out and miss something important. A plan, a date, a threat. By the time the sun came up, the sadness had dried up. Tears are for people who have hope that things will get better on their own. I didn't have that luxury. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It was suspicion. I got dressed slowly. I chose a high-collared blouse and styled my silver hair carefully, fluffing it around my ears to ensure the hearing aids were completely invisible. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look like a victim. She looked like a spy. I decided right then that I wasn't just going to listen. I was going to test them. If they thought I was a senile, helpless old woman, I would play the part. I would give them exactly what they wanted to see, just to see how far they would go. I walked down the stairs, making sure to drag my slippers a little, shuffling like I was 10 years older than I actually was. When I entered the kitchen, the smell of coffee was strong. Clifford was at the table, scrolling on his phone. Kay was at the counter, buttering toast with aggressive, sharp movements. I didn't look at them. I looked at the floor, then looked up, blinking as if I was confused. "Good morning," I said, pitching my voice a little too loud, the way I used to when I couldn't hear myself. Kay didn't turn around. There she is, the Queen of Sheba. I ignored it. I walked over to the coffee pot. "Is there coffee?" I asked, even though the pot was full right in front of me. Clifford looked up. He put on that dazzling, fake smile, the one I used to think was so sweet. He waved at me to get my attention, then gave me a big thumbs up. "Morning, Mom," he shouted, mouthing the words slowly. "Coffee, yes." Then, in his normal voice, he muttered, "Jesus, she's checking out early. Can't even see the pot," right in front of her face. My hand shook as I poured the cup. I wasn't checking out. I was sharper than I had been in a decade. I sat down opposite him. I needed to push him. I needed to know if yesterday was just a bad mood, or if this was truly their plan. I took a sip of the hot coffee and looked Clifford right in the eyes. I let my face crumble a little, looking vulnerable. "Clifford," I said softly, "I've been thinking. I know I'm a lot of work." The room went quiet. Clifford froze. For a second, I thought he might actually show some compassion. "Are you happy living here with me?" I asked. "I worry that I'm a burden." Clifford reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was warm. It felt like the hand of the little boy I used to walk to school. He looked at me with what looked like pure love. He squeezed my hand. He leaned in and enunciated every syllable clearly, making sure I could read his lips perfectly. "Mom, we love living here. You are not a burden. We are family. We take care of each other." It was a perfect performance. If I were deaf, I would have wept with gratitude. But I wasn't deaf. As he held my hand, he turned his head slightly toward Kay, who was now leaning against the counter, watching us with a smirk. "God, she's so needy today," Clifford said, his voice dripping with irritation. "She must sense something is up. It's creepy." Kay snorted. "She doesn't sense anything, Cliff. She's just bored. Did you call the broker?" Clifford didn't let go of my hand. He kept rubbing his thumb over my knuckles soothingly while he answered his wife. "Yeah, I left a voicemail. He said he can come by next Tuesday to do the valuation. We need to get her out of the house for a few hours." "Tuesday?" Kay asked. "That's her birthday. We're having that stupid party." "I know," Clifford said, looking back at me and smiling warmly. "We can do it in the morning before people arrive. I'll drop her at the mall or something. Tell her I'm buying her a present. Make sure the broker knows it's a distress sale," Kay said, taking a bite of her toast. "We need the cash fast. Tell him we're motivated." "I'll tell him," Clifford said. Then he looked at me again, squeezed my hand one last time, and let go. He signed, "I LOVYOU. "Love you too, Mom," he said aloud. Then, under his breath, "Just hurry up and die, please." I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart stopped, then started again with a violent thud. Just hurry up and die. He didn't just want the money. He hated me. He actually hated me for being alive. All those years I spent paying for his college, helping him with his first mortgage, comforting him when his first wife left him. None of it mattered. To him, I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle, a stubborn stump in the yard that wouldn't rot fast enough. I looked down at my eggs. I felt sick. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that I heard every vile word. But I forced myself to pick up my fork. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. The sadness was gone completely. "That's good," I said, answering his fake sign language. "I'm glad you're happy here, Cliffy. I'm glad you love the house." I took a bite of the eggs. They tasted like ash, but I swallowed them. "I love this house too," I added, looking at Kay. "I plan to be here for a very, very long time." Kay rolled her eyes and whispered, "Not if I have anything to do with it." I finished my breakfast in silence. They went back to talking about their plans, something about a boat show in Miami they wanted to attend once the money came through. They spoke freely, confident that the foxes were safe in the henhouse, eating the farmer's grain right in front of her. But they forgot one thing. The farmer had a shotgun. They just didn't know I had loaded it yet. I stood up, took my plate to the sink, and washed it. "I think I'll go rest in the garden," I announced. "Okay, Mom." "Good idea," Clifford shouted. I walked out the back door, into the sunshine. I sat on my favorite bench under the oak tree. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had survived a car crash, the death of a husband, and 5 years of silence. I could survive this. Clifford and Kay were sloppy. They were arrogant. And next Tuesday, on my birthday, they were going to learn that you should never, ever assume the old woman in the corner isn't paying attention. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had a phone call to make, but not to a broker. I needed to find the number for Mr. Henderson, my estate attorney. The test was over. The war had begun. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing. Then came the chirp of the car alarm disarming, the rumble of Clifford's SUV starting up, and the crunch of tires on gravel as they pulled out of the driveway. I stood by the kitchen window, hidden behind the curtain, watching them drive away. They were heading to the mall, ostensibly to buy me a birthday gift. For the first time in years, the silence in the house didn't feel lonely. It felt like an opportunity. My heart was hammering against my ribs, faster than it should have been. I wasn't a spy. I was a retired librarian. I was a mother. I shouldn't be sneaking around my own home, investigating my own child. But the memory of Clifford's voice saying, "Just hurry up and die," was burned into my mind. It gave me a strange, cold energy. I didn't go to the garden. I went straight to the den. This room used to be my husband's study. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco when he was alive. Now Clifford had taken it over. It smelled of stale coffee and that sickly sweet body spray he wore. The desk was covered in clutter, unopened mail, fast food wrappers, and stacks of documents. I felt a pang of guilt as I stepped behind the desk. Was I being paranoid? Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe the comment at breakfast was just a bad joke, a moment of frustration. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong. I started sifting through the papers. The first thing I found was a stack of credit card statements. I picked up the top one. It was red, past due. I looked at the balance. $24,000. I gasped. I picked up another one. $12,000. Another for $8,000. I did the math in my head. My son and his wife were nearly $50,000 in debt on credit cards alone. I saw charges for online gambling sites, expensive liquor stores, and designer boutiques. While they were living in my house rent-free, eating my food, and complaining about my burden, they were spending money like water. But debt isn't a crime. Stupidity isn't a crime. I kept digging. I opened the bottom drawer. It was stuffed with files. I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled real estate. Inside wasn't just a valuation. It was a printed email chain between Clifford and a man named Marcus, the real estate broker. I adjusted my glasses and read the top email. From Marcus Real Estate to Clifford Todd subject, quick sale strategy. Cliff, if we list it as a distress sale, we can move it in under 30 days. But you need to have the title clear. You mentioned the owner is incapacitated. We need that power of attorney signed and filed before we can accept any offers. The buyers will want immediate possession. The house needs to be empty. My hands started to shake. Incapacitated. They were telling people I was incapacitated. I flipped to the next page. It was a printout from a website for a place called Shady Pines State Facility. I knew the name. Everyone in Denver knew the name. It wasn't a retirement community. It wasn't a nice assisted living center with bingo nights and garden walks. It was a warehouse for the elderly who had no money and no family. It was a place where they sedated you to keep you quiet and where the smell of bleach never quite covered the smell of urine. There was a brochure clipped to the email. It boasted efficient care and state-subsidized rates. I felt the bile rise in my throat. They weren't planning to kill me. Murder is messy. Murder gets you investigated. No, their plan was much cleaner and much more cruel. They were going to declare me mentally incompetent. They were going to use my deafness and my confusion, which I had foolishly played up to test them, as proof that I couldn't live alone. They would get power of attorney, dump me in a state-run facility where I would rot in a shared room with strangers, and sell my home, the home my husband built, the home I paid for, to pay off their gambling debts. I sat down in Clifford's leather chair. The room spun. It wasn't about death. It was about erasure. They wanted to delete me. To them, I wasn't a person with memories and feelings. I was just a line item on a balance sheet that needed to be liquidated. I looked at the dates on the emails. They had been planning this for 3 months. 3 months of smiling at me. 3 months of cooking my dinner and patting my hand. I grabbed my smartphone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped it on the desk. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Focus, Joan. I picked up the phone and opened the camera. I took clear pictures of the credit card bills. I took pictures of the emails with the broker. I took a picture of the Shady Pines brochure. Then I found the smoking gun. It was a draft letter addressed to my family doctor, Dr. Stevenson. It wasn't sent yet, but it was typed out and ready. Dear Dr. Stevenson, we are increasingly concerned about Mother's cognitive decline. She is becoming aggressive and confused. She wanders at night. We believe she is a danger to herself. We need to discuss moving her to a secure facility for her own safety. Aggressive? Wandering? I spent my nights knitting and reading romance novels. I had never wandered in my life. They were fabricating symptoms. They were building a case to lock me away. I took a picture of the letter. I carefully put everything back exactly where I found it. The credit cards on the left, the folder in the drawer, the brochure tucked in the back. I wiped the desk where I had touched it, just in case. I stood up. My knees felt weak, but my spirit felt like iron. If they had just asked me for money, I might have given it to them. If they had told me they were in trouble, I would have helped. I would have refinanced the house. I would have done anything for my son. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing. Then came the chirp of the car alarm disarming, the rumble of Clifford's SUV starting up, and the crunch of tires on gravel as they pulled out of the driveway. I stood by the kitchen window, hidden behind the curtain, watching them drive away. They were heading to the mall, ostensibly to buy me a birthday gift. For the first time in years, the silence in the house didn't feel lonely. It felt like an opportunity. My heart was hammering against my ribs, faster than it should have been. I wasn't a spy. I was a retired librarian. I was a mother. I shouldn't be sneaking around my own home, investigating my own child. But the memory of Clifford's voice saying, "Just hurry up and die," was burned into my mind. It gave me a strange, cold energy. I didn't go to the garden. I went straight to the den. This room used to be my husband's study. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco when he was alive. Now Clifford had taken it over. It smelled of stale coffee and that sickly sweet body spray he wore. The desk was covered in clutter, unopened mail, fast food wrappers, and stacks of documents. I felt a pang of guilt as I stepped behind the desk. Was I being paranoid? Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe the comment at breakfast was just a bad joke, a moment of frustration. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong. I started sifting through the papers. The first thing I found was a stack of credit card statements. I picked up the top one. It was red, past due. I looked at the balance. $24,000. I gasped. I picked up another one. $12,000. Another for 8,000. I did the math in my head. My son and his wife were nearly $50,000 in debt on credit cards alone. I saw charges for online gambling sites, expensive liquor stores, and designer boutiques. While they were living in my house rent-free, eating my food, and complaining about my burden, they were spending money like water. But debt isn't a crime. Stupidity isn't a crime. I kept digging. I opened the bottom drawer. It was stuffed with files. I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled real estate. Inside wasn't just a valuation. It was a printed email chain between Clifford and a man named Marcus, the real estate broker. I adjusted my glasses and read the top email. From Marcus Real Estate to Clifford Todd subject, quick sale strategy. Cliff, if we list it as a distress sale, we can move it in under 30 days. But you need to have the title clear. You mentioned the owner is incapacitated. We need that power of attorney signed and filed before we can accept any offers. The buyers will want immediate possession. The house needs to be empty. My hands started to shake. Incapacitated. They were telling people I was incapacitated. I flipped to the next page. It was a printout from a website for a place called Shady Pines State Facility. I knew the name. Everyone in Denver knew the name. It wasn't a retirement community. It wasn't a nice assisted living center with bingo nights and garden walks. It was a warehouse for the elderly who had no money and no family. It was a place where they sedated you to keep you quiet and where the smell of bleach never quite covered the smell of urine. There was a brochure clipped to the email. It boasted efficient care and state-subsidized rates. I felt the bile rise in my throat. They weren't planning to kill me. Murder is messy. Murder gets you investigated. No, their plan was much cleaner and much more cruel. They were going to declare me mentally incompetent. They were going to use my deafness and my confusion, which I had foolishly played up to test them, as proof that I couldn't live alone. They would get power of attorney, dump me in a state-run facility where I would rot in a shared room with strangers and sell my home, the home my husband built, the home I paid for, to pay off their gambling debts. I sat down in Clifford's leather chair. The room spun. It wasn't about death. It was about erasure. They wanted to delete me. To them, I wasn't a person with memories and feelings. I was just a line item on a balance sheet that needed to be liquidated. I looked at the dates on the emails. They had been planning this for 3 months. 3 months of smiling at me. 3 months of cooking my dinner and patting my hand. I grabbed my smartphone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it on the desk. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Focus, Joan. I picked up the phone and opened the camera. I took clear pictures of the credit card bills. I took pictures of the emails with the broker. I took a picture of the Shady Pines brochure. Then I found the smoking gun. It was a draft letter addressed to my family doctor, Dr. Stevenson. It wasn't sent yet, but it was typed out and ready. Dear Dr. Stevenson, we are increasingly concerned about Mother's cognitive decline. She is becoming aggressive and confused. She wanders at night. We believe she is a danger to herself. We need to discuss moving her to a secure facility for her own safety. Aggressive? Wandering? I spent my nights knitting and reading romance novels. I had never wandered in my life. They were fabricating symptoms. They were building a case to lock me away. I took a picture of the letter. I carefully put everything back exactly where I found it. The credit cards on the left, the folder in the drawer, the brochure tucked in the back. I wiped the desk where I had touched it, just in case. I stood up. My knees felt weak, but my spirit felt like iron. If they had just asked me for money, I might have given it to them. If they had told me they were in trouble, I would have helped. I would have refinanced the house. I would have done anything for my son. But they didn't ask. They stole. They plotted. They looked at me and saw a problem to be disposed of. I heard the rumble of the SUV returning. They were back early. I slipped out of the den and hurried to the living room. I sat in my armchair and picked up my knitting. My heart was racing so fast, I thought they would hear it from the driveway. The front door opened. "We're back," Clifford shouted. I didn't look up. I kept knitting, counting the stitches. 1, 2, 3. "Mom." Clifford walked into the room. He was holding a small gift bag. "Look, we got you a little early birthday treat." He held up a box of chocolates, cheap ones from the drugstore. I looked up and smiled. It was the hardest smile I have ever faked in my life. "Oh, thank you, Clifford," I said. "You are such a thoughtful boy." He beamed at me, then turned to Kay. "See? She's happy with anything. Easy." Kay didn't smile. She looked around the room, sniffing the air. "Why does it smell like your cologne in here?" I froze. I had been in the den. The scent must have clung to me. "I gave Mom a hug before we left," Clifford said, shrugging. "Probably that." Kay narrowed her eyes, but let it go. "Whatever. I'm going to take a nap. Dealing with the mall traffic gave me a migraine." She walked past me. As she passed, she muttered, "Enjoy the chocolate, you old witch. It'll be your last decent meal before you're eating gruel." I watched her walk up the stairs. I looked down at the box of chocolates in my lap. They thought they had days to execute their plan. They thought they had the upper hand, but they didn't know that I had seen the paperwork. They didn't know that I knew exactly where Shady Pines was, and they certainly didn't know that I had a meeting with my own lawyer in exactly 2 hours. I wasn't going to Shady Pines. And come Tuesday, they wouldn't be going to Miami. They would be going to the street. I put the chocolates on the table. I didn't eat one. I had lost my appetite for anything sweet. I was hungry for something else now. Justice. I didn't waste a single minute feeling sorry for myself. The moment Kay went upstairs to nap and Clifford settled onto the couch to watch football, I went into motion. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't write a note. I simply put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and walked into the living room. Clifford didn't even look away from the TV. He just waved a hand at me, his eyes glued to the screen. "I am going to the library," I announced, making sure my voice sounded a bit flat and weary. "I need new books." Clifford gave me a thumbs up. "Have fun, Mom," he shouted, not bothering to turn down the volume. Then, quieter, thank God. At least 2 hours of peace. I walked out the door, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. I didn't go to the library. I walked 2 blocks down to the corner of Elm and Main, out of sight of the house, and called a taxi. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I had a mission. When the yellow cab pulled up, I didn't struggle with the door. I slid in and gave the driver the address of a building downtown. It wasn't a doctor's office. It was the law firm of Henderson and Miller. Mr. Henderson, Bill, had been my husband's lawyer for 30 years. He was the one who helped us set up our wills when Clifford was just a baby. He was a good man, honest as the day is long, and he was the only person left in this city I felt I could trust. The ride felt like it took forever. Every red light felt like a trap. I kept checking my watch. Clifford would expect me back in 2 hours. If I was late, he might come looking, not because he cared, but because he'd worry I'd wandered off and ruined his incompetence narrative before he was ready to spin it. I marched into the law office and told the receptionist I had an emergency. She looked at my frantic eyes and didn't argue. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in Bill Henderson's office. Bill looked older than the last time I saw him. His hair was thinner, but his eyes were just as sharp. He stood up smiling, and reached for a notepad to write a greeting, assuming I still couldn't hear. "Put the pen down, Bill," I said. My voice was strong. "I can hear you." Bill dropped the pen. It clattered onto his mahogany desk. "Joan, but how?" "New hearing aids," I said quickly. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is what I've heard since I got them." I sat down and laid it all out. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him about the conversation in the kitchen. I told him about the distress sale emails. I took my phone out and showed him the pictures of the letter to Dr. Stevenson about my wandering and aggression. Bill's face went from shocked to furious. He put on his reading glasses and studied the photo of the letter on my phone screen. His jaw tightened. "This is fraud, Joan," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. They are building a paper trail to have you declared incompetent so they can override your authority." "I know," I said. "They want to put me in Shady Pines." Over my dead body, Bill growled. He hit a button on his intercom. "Susan, get the file for Joan Todd. Now, and bring me the notary stamp." He looked at me. "We need to move fast. If they file for emergency guardianship before we act, it becomes a mess. We need to revoke Clifford's power of attorney immediately." For the next hour, we worked. It was a flurry of signing and initialing. First, we executed a revocation of power of attorney. I signed a document formally stripping Clifford of any right to make decisions for me, financial or medical. Second, we created a new power of attorney, naming Bill himself as my temporary agent until I could find a professional fiduciary. Third, we updated my living trust. The house was in the trust, which meant Clifford couldn't sell it without being the trustee. We amended the trust to explicitly state that Clifford was removed as a successor trustee effective immediately. "Now for the fail-safe," Bill said. He pulled out a video camera. "I am going to interview you. We are going to record you reading today's newspaper, answering current events questions, and explaining exactly what you are doing and why. If they ever try to tell a judge you are senile, we play this tape. It proves you are sound, sharp, and fully aware." We did the recording. I looked straight into the lens and said, "My name is Joan Todd. I am of sound mind. I am removing my son from my will because he is conspiring to imprison me in a state facility to steal my assets." It felt good to say it out loud. It felt like cutting a heavy weight off my ankles. "What about the money?" I asked. "They have access to the checking account for groceries. Not anymore," Bill said. He logged into his computer. "We are opening a new account under the trust's name at a different bank. I'm transferring the bulk of your liquid savings right now. We'll leave just enough in the joint account so the checks don't bounce immediately and tip them off before Tuesday. But the nest egg, the retirement fund, it's gone. It's safe." I watched him type. Click. Enter. Done. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The money was safe. The house was safe. My freedom was safe. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:45 p.m. I had been gone an hour and a half. "I have to go," I said, standing up. "If I'm not back before they wake up from their nap, they'll get suspicious." "Joan, don't go back there," Bill said, looking worried. "Stay in a hotel. Stay here." "No," I said firmly. "My birthday party is on Tuesday. I need to expose them. If I leave now, they'll just spin a story to the neighbors that I ran away because I was crazy. They'll play the victim. I need everyone to see the truth. I need to look them in the eye when I do it." Bill hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful. You're living with sharks." "I know," I said, clutching my purse. "But I'm not the bait anymore." The ride home was excruciating. Traffic was heavy on the highway. I watched the minutes tick by on the taxi's dashboard clock. 4:05, 4:10, 4:15. Clifford usually woke up around 4:30 to start thinking about dinner. If he came downstairs and saw I wasn't there, he might call the police to report a missing vulnerable adult just to start his paper trail. "Can you go any faster?" I asked the driver. "Trying, lady," he grunted. We pulled onto my street at 4:22. I paid him cash and practically jumped out of the car before it stopped rolling. I speed walked down the sidewalk, clutching the library books I had the foresight to check out 3 weeks ago and had hidden in my tote bag. I walked up the driveway. The house was quiet. The SUV was still parked in the same spot. I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could. My hands were trembling again, but not from fear this time, from adrenaline. I stepped inside. The TV was off. The living room was empty. I crept toward the kitchen. I heard a noise, the creak of floorboards upstairs. They were just waking up. I threw my coat on the hook and dumped the books on the coffee table. I sat down in my armchair, picked up one of the books, and opened it to a random page. I forced my breathing to slow down. In, out, in, out. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, slow. Clifford walked into the living room, scratching his stomach, yawning. He looked at me, then at the clock. "Oh, you're back," he said. He sounded disappointed. I looked up and smiled, tapping the book. "Good books," I said, keeping my voice level. "Great, Mom." "Good for you?" he mumbled. He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. "Hey, Kay, Mom's back." Unfortunately, he yelled up the stairs. I heard Kay groan from the bedroom. Did she bring dinner? Or do I have to cook for the invalid again? "No dinner," Clifford called back. I turned a page of my book. I wasn't reading the words. I was staring at the letters, watching them swim before my eyes. I had done it. The trap was set. The legal armor was locked in place. They could insult me. They could plan. They could print all the brochures they wanted. It didn't matter. I was safe, and they were walking straight into a buzzsaw. Now, all I had to do was survive the weekend. All I had to do was play the deaf, helpless mother for 3 more days without screaming. I tightened my grip on the book. I can do this, I told myself, for the woman I used to be, for the woman I am now. Tuesday was coming, and it was going to be a birthday party they would never forget. Tuesday morning arrived with a gray sky, but the house was buzzing with bright, frantic energy. It was my 70th birthday. It was also the day my son and his wife believed they were celebrating their impending freedom. I spent an extra hour in front of the vanity mirror. I put on my best navy blue dress, the one with the lace collar that Clifford's father bought me for our 40th anniversary. I applied my lipstick carefully. I checked my hearing aids. They were snug, invisible, and turned up to maximum volume. When I walked downstairs, the transformation of my home was complete. Balloons were tied to the banister. A banner that said 70 and fabulous hung crookedly over the fireplace. It looked festive, but to me, it looked like a stage set, a cheap backdrop for a bad play. Guests started arriving at noon. These were people I had known for decades. Martha from the gardening club, Reverend Miller from the church, my neighbor Sally, who always brought zucchini bread. They hugged me, shouted "Happy birthday" inches from my face, and patted my arm. I played my role perfectly. I nodded enthusiastically. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I pretended to struggle to follow conversations, leaning in and asking, "What was that, dear?" just to keep the illusion alive. By 1 o'clock, the living room was packed. The noise was overwhelming, a cacophony of laughter, clinking glasses, and chatter. But for the first time in 5 years, I didn't mind the noise. Every sound was a weapon I was sharpening. I took my seat in the high-backed floral armchair in the corner of the room. It was my usual spot. From here, I had a view of the entire room, but I was far enough away from the buffet table that people tended to ignore me once they had paid their respects. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, looking for all the world like a tired, checked-out old lady waiting for her cake. But my right hand was resting deep in the pocket of my cardigan. My fingers were wrapped around my smartphone. I had the voice memo app open. All I had to do was tap the red circle. Kay was holding court, near the window, holding a large glass of Chardonnay. She was wearing a dress that was too tight and too expensive, likely bought with one of my credit cards I had seen the bill for. She was talking to her two friends, Linda and Susan. I knew them. They were the type of women who never looked you in the eye and laughed too loud at mean jokes. They drifted closer to my chair. They didn't lower their voices. Why would they? To them, I was just a piece of furniture. A deaf statue. I felt my heart rate spike. I slid my thumb over the screen of my phone and tapped the red button. I felt a tiny vibration. Recording. Kay took a sip of wine and gestured toward me with her glass. She was standing right behind my chair now. I could smell her perfume. Look at her, Kay said, her voice clear and dripping with disdain. She's totally out of it. She's been staring at that same spot on the rug for 20 minutes. Poor thing, Linda said, though she didn't sound sympathetic. Is she, all there? Barely, Kay laughed. Cliff says she's getting aggressive, too. It's part of the dementia. That's why we have to make the move. I kept my face perfectly still. I didn't blink. I stared at the rug, just like she said. So what's the plan? Susan asked, Are you guys listing the house? Monday morning, Kay said triumphantly. The broker is coming at 9 a.m. We're listing it as a distress sale to move it fast. We should have the cash in escrow by next month. That's fast, Linda said. And what about her? State facility, Kay said. Shady Pines. We got the paperwork ready. Once she's settled in there, we are free. Finally, we've already picked out the boat. A 30-footer. We're going to name it Freedom. They all laughed. A cruel, clinking sound of wine glasses touching. To the freedom. Susan toasted. To getting our lives back, Kay added. God, I can't wait to get out of this dusty museum of a house. I sat there, absorbing every word. My phone was capturing it all. The confession, the greed, the callousness. They weren't just discussing real estate. They were celebrating my disposal. They were toasting to my exile while drinking my wine in my living room. I wanted to stand up and slap the wine glass out of her hand. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to remain frozen. The recording needed to be clear. I needed Clifford on tape, too. As if on cue, the front door opened and Clifford came bustling in from the porch. He was sweating, playing the part of the harried, devoted son. He clapped his hands for attention. Okay, everyone. Attention, please, he bellowed. The room quieted down. Clifford made a beeline for me. He crouched down next to my chair, putting his face right in front of mine. His breath smelled of beer. He grabbed my shoulders, a little too roughly. Happy birthday, M.O.M., he shouted, exaggerating the lip movements so much he looked like a cartoon fish. Then he rolled his eyes so far back in his head, he looked at the ceiling, sharing a look of exhaustion with Kay. Did you hear that, Mom? He asked loudly, still gripping me. 70 years old. Wow. He turned his head slightly toward the room, smiling that fake politician smile. She's so confused today, he said to the guests, lowering his voice just enough that a deaf person wouldn't catch it, but everyone else could. We're just trying to make this a good last memory for her before, before things get harder. The guests murmured sympathetically. What a good son, they were thinking. What a saint. I looked at him. I looked deep into his eyes. I saw the hollowness there. I saw the calculation. I smiled. It was the sweetest, most grandmotherly smile I could muster. I reached up and patted his cheek. "Thank you, Clifford," I said. "You are such a special son." He patted my hand condescendingly. "Thanks, Mom. Okay, who wants cake?" He stood up and walked away, rubbing his hands together. "Let's get this over with," he muttered to Kay as he passed her. "Cut the cake, get the gifts, and let's get these people out of here." I stopped the recording on my phone. I checked the screen. Saved. I had it. I had the distress sale. I had the Shady Pines. I had the get this over with. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I smoothed my dress. They thought this was the end. They thought they were in the final act of their play, where the old woman exits stage left and the heroes sail off into the sunset on their new boat. But they had forgotten whose stage they were standing on. I watched Clifford carry the cake out from the kitchen. The candles were lit. The room began to sing "Happy Birthday." I took a deep breath. I wasn't Joan, the victim, anymore. I wasn't Joan the burden. I stood up. My legs were strong. My head was high. The singing continued, but I wasn't looking at the cake. I was looking at my lawyer, Bill Henderson, who had just walked through the front door at the back of the room. He nodded to me once. It was time. The bait had been taken. Now, I just had to reel them in. The singing faded into a smattering of applause. The candles on the cake flickered. 7 of them, one for each decade. The smoke drifted up, smelling of burnt wax and vanilla. I looked at the cake. It was from the grocery store, likely bought 5 minutes before the party started. I didn't blow out the candles. I didn't have enough breath in my lungs for games anymore. I just sat there, smiling that vacant, plastic smile I had perfected, waiting for the performance to end. "I'll get them, Mom," Clifford said, leaning in too close. He blew the candles out with a wet, heavy breath that sprayed tiny droplets of saliva onto the icing. "Yay." Kay clapped her hands, looking at her watch. She was bored. She wanted this over. But Clifford wasn't done. He loved an audience. He grabbed a spoon and tapped it against his wine glass. Clink, clink, clink. "Everyone, if I could just say a few words," Clifford announced. He stepped into the center of the room, puffing out his chest. He looked like a man running for office, not a son celebrating his mother. The room went quiet. My neighbors, my church friends, the people who had known me since I was a young bride, they all turned to look at him. "You all know how hard the last few years have been," Clifford began, his voice dropping to a somber, theatrical whisper. He put a hand on my shoulder, weighing it down. "Since Mom's accident, since the silence took her from us, it's been a challenge." He paused for effect. I saw Martha from the gardening club dab her eyes with a tissue. She bought it. They all bought it. Kay and I, well, we've had to put our lives on hold. Clifford continued, looking bravely at the ceiling. "We moved in here to be her ears, to be her protectors. It's a 24-hour job. It's exhausting. We don't get to travel. We don't get to have weekends off. But we do it because we love her, because she's family." He squeezed my shoulder hard. It hurt. "So, here's to you, Mom." He raised his glass. "To making your life as comfortable as possible for as long as you're with us." Here, the guests murmured. Kay raised her glass, smirking. "To Mom." It was perfect. The perfect lie. He had painted himself as the martyr and me as the burden. He had set the stage so that when they moved me to Shady Pines next week, everyone would say, "Oh, poor Clifford. He tried so hard, but she just needed too much care." I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt before I walked down the aisle 50 years ago. The certainty that life was about to change forever. I reached up and took Clifford's hand off my shoulder. I didn't brush it away gently. I gripped his wrist and removed it firmly. Clifford looked down, confused. I stood up. I didn't struggle to rise. I didn't use the armrests for leverage. I stood up straight, my spine rigid, my chin high. I smoothed the front of my navy dress. The room was still looking at Clifford, expecting him to cut the cake. But my movement caught there. I looked directly at Bill Henderson at the back of the room. He gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. I turned to Clifford. I didn't look at his lips. I looked him dead in the eye. "Thank you, Clifford," I said. My voice didn't sound like the voice of a deaf woman. It wasn't loud or unmodulated. It was crisp. It was sharp. It was the voice of the woman who used to run the PDA and negotiate with contractors. Clifford froze. His glass tilted in his hand, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Mom." The room went deadly silent. You could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. "That was a lovely speech," I continued, projecting my voice so even the people in the back could hear. "It was almost as moving as the conversation you had with Kay this morning while you were drinking my wine." Clifford's face went pale. "Mom, what are you talking about? You're confused." "Am I?" I turned to Kay. She was holding her glass halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. "I don't think I'm confused, Kay," I said pleasantly. "I think I'm actually quite lucid. Lucid enough to know that Shady Pines is not a retirement resort. It's a state-run warehouse for the indigent." Kay dropped her glass. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered, splashing Chardonnay over her expensive shoes. "She's having an episode." Kay shrieked, turning to the guests. "She's having a dementia episode. Clifford, grab her. She doesn't know what she's saying." The guests looked uneasy. They started to whisper. "Is it true? Is Joan losing it?" Clifford reached for me. "Mom, sit down. You're making a scene. You're not well." I took a step back, out of his reach. "I am perfectly well, Clifford," I snapped. "And I can hear you. I have been able to hear you since Friday. I heard you tell your wife to hurry up and die. I heard you call me a useless old bat. And I heard you plotting to sell my house, this house, so you can buy a boat named Freedom. That's a lie." Clifford shouted, his face turning red. "She's paranoid. It's the brain damage from the accident. She's imagining things." He was loud. He was convincing. I saw doubt creeping into the faces of my friends. Reverend Miller looked concerned. "I thought you might say that," I said calmly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. "Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it?" I asked. I walked over to the buffet table where the Bluetooth speaker sat. It had been playing gentle jazz music earlier. I tapped my screen. The Bluetooth connected with a happy little bloop sound. "Clifford says I'm imagining things." I addressed the room. "He says I'm senile. Let's see what you think." I pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. It filled the living room, booming off the walls. "Look at her," Kay's voice sneered from the speaker. "She's totally out of it. We're listing the house on Monday. We're listing it as a distress sale. We should have the cash in escrow by next month." The guests gasped. Martha covered her mouth with her hands. The recording continued. "And what about her?" Linda's voice asked. "State facility," Kay's voice replied, loud and arrogant. "Shady Pines. Once she's settled in there, we are free. Finally, God, I can't wait to get out of this dusty museum of a house." I let it play until the sound of their cruel laughter filled the room. Then I paused it. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of truth landing like a bomb. I looked at my neighbors. They weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at Clifford and Kay with absolute horror. Martha stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You were going to put her in a state home so you could buy a boat." No, it's out of context." Clifford stammered, backing away. He looked small. He looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. We were joking. It was dark humor. Stress relief. It didn't sound like a joke, son, Reverend Miller said, his voice deep and stern. He set his cake down on the table, looking at Clifford with profound disappointment. It sounded like a plan. Kay tried to rally. She turned on me, her face twisted and ugly. You sneaked around. You spy. You sat there and listened to us. You sick old witch. Yes, I said. I listened. I listened to you spend my money. I listened to you mock me. And I listened to you plan to erase me. I took a step toward them. They flinched. This is my house, I said. I paid for every brick. I planted every flower in that garden. And I raised a son here who I thought loved me. I looked at Clifford. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his shoes. But that son is gone, I said softly. The man standing in front of me is a stranger who wants me dead. Mom, please, Clifford whispered. I have debts. We were desperate. Desperation is asking for help, I said. Betrayal is stealing a life. I turned to Bill Henderson. Bill, do you have the papers? Right here, Joan, Bill said, stepping forward. He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket pocket. I took the envelope and tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap next to the birthday cake. That is your eviction notice, I said, and a copy of the restraining order. You have 24 hours to get your things and get out of my house. 24 hours? Kay screamed. We have nowhere to go. You can't do this. We have rights. We've lived here for 2 years. And you've been plotting against me for 3 months, I said. I think 24 hours is generous. If you're not gone by tomorrow at noon, the police will escort you out. Bill has already spoken to the sheriff. I looked around the room at my guests. They were stunned, but they were on my side. I could feel it. The wall of support that Clifford thought he could dismantle had just turned into a fortress around me. Now, I said, picking up a clean fork, I believe it's time for cake, but I don't think there's enough for everyone. Clifford, Kay, you should probably start packing. Clifford looked at the room, then at me. He opened his mouth to argue, but the look on Reverend Miller's face stopped him. He grabbed Kay's arm. She was sobbing now, angry, ugly tears. They turned and ran up the stairs. I watched them go. Then I turned back to my friends. My hands were shaking just a little, but I felt lighter than air. Does anyone want a corner piece? I asked. The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause. Real applause. Martha rushed forward and hugged me. I hugged her back. I could hear her whisper, "You're amazing, Joan." And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't just believe it. I knew it. The last car door slammed shut outside. I watched through the front window as Reverend Miller's sedan pulled away. Martha had stayed until the very end, squeezing my hand and promising to bring over a casserole tomorrow. But I told her to go. I needed to do this alone. I turned the deadbolt on the front door. Click. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the peaceful silence of solitude. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. The air smelled of stale wine and the burnt wick of the birthday candles. I turned around. Clifford was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He had taken off his tie. His face was blotchy and red. Kay was sitting on the stairs behind him, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Mom," Clifford said. His voice was cracked. He took a step toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Please, you have to listen." I walked past him into the living room and started picking up the paper plates. I listened for 3 days. "Clifford, I think I've heard enough." "You misunderstood," he insisted, following me. "You heard snippets. You heard Kay venting. You know how she gets when she's stressed. It was just talk. We would never actually put you in a place like that. I stopped and looked at him. I held up a dirty paper plate. I saw the brochure, Clifford. I saw the emails to the broker. I saw the draft letter to Dr. Stevenson claiming I was aggressive and wandering at night. Clifford stopped dead. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. You weren't just venting, I said, my voice steady. You were building a case. You were systematically documenting lies to strip me of my rights. That isn't stress. That is a conspiracy. It was for your own good. Kay shouted from the stairs. She looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. You can't live here alone. You're 70. You're deaf. We were trying to help you. I am not deaf. I shouted back. The force of my own voice surprised me. And I am not helpless. I was living here perfectly fine before you moved in. I paid my bills. I kept my garden. I had a life. You didn't move in to help me. You moved in because you lost your condo and you had nowhere else to go. Clifford flinched. He hated when I mentioned his failures. Mom, look, we messed up, Clifford said, trying a new tactic. He dropped to his knees in front of me, looking like a penitent little boy. We got greedy. I admit it. The debt, it's crushing us, Mom. I owe people money. Bad people. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. He reached for my hand. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Please don't kick us out. We can fix this. We'll cancel the listing. We'll burn the papers. Just let us stay. We're family. I looked down at him. Tears were streaming down his face. Real tears. For a second, my heart wavered. A mother is programmed to comfort her child when he cries. It is an instinct as deep as breathing. I wanted to smooth his hair. I wanted to tell him we would figure it out. But then I remembered the toast. I remembered the laughter. I remembered, hurry up and die. I know you have debts, Clifford, I said coldly. I saw the credit card statements in your desk. I saw the online gambling charges. He looked up, terrified. You went in my desk. I did, I said. And I didn't just look. I took action. I pulled a chair out and sat down, looking down at him. Yesterday, when I told you I was going to the library, I went to see Bill Henderson. Clifford's face went white. He knew Bill. He knew Bill didn't play games. We revoked your power of attorney, I said, ticking the points off on my fingers. It is null and void. We removed you as the successor trustee of the estate. You have no authority over this house, my medical care, or my finances. Mom, you can't. And I cut him off. We moved the money. Clifford froze. What? The savings account, I said. The investment portfolio. The emergency fund. It's all gone. It's in a new trust account at a bank you don't know under a name you can't access. But, Clifford stammered. But the joint account, the one for the bills. I left $500 in it. I said, enough to buy groceries for the week. But the rest, the money you were counting on to pay off your gambling debts, it's gone, Clifford. You can't touch a cent of it. The transformation was instant. The sorrow vanished from his face, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. You can't do that, he screamed, scrambling to his feet. I need that money. They'll kill me, Mom. You don't understand. I owe $40,000. Then you better get a job, I said, calm as ice. Or sell your car. Or sell that watch you bought. You selfish old. Kay started to lunge down the stairs, but Clifford held her back. Selfish. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I gave you a home. I fed you. I would have given you the shirt off my back if you had just asked me. If you had come to me and said, Mom, I'm in trouble, I would have helped you. But you didn't ask. You tried to steal. You tried to bury me before I was dead. I stood up and walked to the front door. I opened it wide. The night air was cool. "You have 24 hours. I said. "What?" Clifford blinked, disoriented. "Eviction," I said. "Bill Henderson is filing the formal order tomorrow morning, but I am giving you a head start. I want you and your wife and your boxes out of my house by sunset tomorrow. If you are still here, the sheriff will remove you. And since I have a recording of you conspiring to commit elder fraud, I don't think you want the police involved." "Mom, please," Clifford sobbed. He was crying hard now, his body shaking. "Where will we go? We have no money. We have nowhere." I looked at him. I really looked at him. "You're a smart boy, Clifford," I said. "You'll figure it out. You always said I was the burden. Well, now you're free. You don't have to take care of me anymore." "I love you," he wailed. "I love you, Mom." I looked at his tears. They were plentiful. They were wet. But they weren't for me. He wasn't crying because he had lost his mother's trust. He was crying because the ATM had just been unplugged. He was crying for the boat he would never buy. He was crying for the easy life that just evaporated. "I know you love me, Clifford," I said softly, "but you love my money more. And that is why you have to go." I pointed to the stairs. "Start packing. I'm going to bed. And Clifford." He looked up, eyes red and swollen. "Don't try anything tonight," I said. I locked my bedroom door, and I have 911 on speed dial. I can hear perfectly now. Remember? If I hear a single footstep outside my door, the police are coming. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned my back on them. I walked up the stairs, past Kay, who wouldn't look at me. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. I went inside and closed the door. I locked it. Then I wedged a heavy chair under the handle just to be sure. I sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. I felt a deep, aching hollow in my chest. It hurts to cut off your own child. It feels like cutting off a limb. But then I looked at the nightstand. There was a picture of me and my late husband smiling on a beach in Florida. He had worked so hard for this house. He had worked so hard to make sure I was safe. He wouldn't want me to be a victim. He would want me to be a survivor. I took the hearing aids out of my ears and placed them in their case. The world went silent again. But for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt safe. It felt like peace. I lay down and pulled the quilt up to my chin. Downstairs, I knew they were panicking. I knew they were shoving clothes into bags and arguing about whose fault it was. But I couldn't hear them. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the house would be empty. Tomorrow, my life would be my own again. It has been 3 months since the birthday eviction, as I like to call it. I am sitting on my back porch, drinking a cup of Earl Grey tea. It is a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week they had planned to sell my house. But there is no for sale sign in the yard. The only thing in the yard is my new golden retriever, Rusty, chasing a tennis ball through the hydrangeas. I can hear his paws thumping on the grass. I can hear the wind chimes singing in the breeze. I can hear the hum of the neighbor's lawnmower. It is noisy. It is chaotic. And I absolutely love it. The house feels different now. It isn't the silent tomb it was for 5 years, and it isn't the hostile war zone it became when Clifford and Kay moved in. It is a home again. I didn't stay alone. I took my own advice about not being isolated. I decided that this house was too big for just one woman and a dog, but instead of letting my family leech off me, I found a better solution. I have a tenant now. Her name is Sarah. She is a 24-year-old nursing student at the university. She rents the upstairs suite, the same rooms Clifford and Kay occupied. The difference is night and day. Sarah pays her rent on the first of the month. Every month. She helps me carry the heavy grocery bags, not because she wants my money, but because she was raised right. Last night, we sat in the kitchen for 2 hours drinking tea. She told me about her classes, and I told her about the time I backpacked through Europe in the 70s. She looks at me when she speaks. She enunciates clearly, even though she knows my hearing is back. She respects me. It is amazing how much brighter the world looks when you remove the people who are standing in your light. As for Clifford, well, reality hit him hard. He called me last week. It was a short call. He is living in a small studio apartment across town. Kay left him about 2 weeks after I kicked them out. Apparently, without the promise of my inheritance and the freedom boat, she decided he wasn't worth the effort. He told me he got a job at a home improvement store. He sounded tired. He sounded humble. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said again. "I know," I told him. And I meant it. I forgive him as a mother, but I will never trust him as a banker. We are rebuilding our relationship, but it will be on my terms. We meet for lunch once a month. I pay the bill. We talk about the weather, but he never, ever asks about the house. He knows that door is closed. I didn't just protect the house. I protected my legacy. I went back to Bill Henderson's office last month to finalize my estate plan. I looked at the numbers, the savings, the investments, the assets that Clifford was so desperate to get his hands on. It is a significant amount of money, enough to make someone comfortable, or enough to ruin someone who hasn't earned it. I decided not to let my money be a curse. I set up the Joan Todd Foundation. When I pass, the bulk of my estate will not go to Clifford. He will receive a small, monthly stipend, enough to keep him from starving, but not enough to fund a gambling habit. He will have to work for his luxury, just like I did. The rest, it is going to a scholarship fund for deaf students who want to study music and arts. It is going to help people who have been silenced find their voice. I signed those papers with a steady hand. It felt like victory. My money won't buy a boat named Freedom. It will buy actual freedom for hundreds of young people. I put my teacup down and watched Rusty finally catch the tennis ball. He barked a loud, joyful sound. I smiled. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have heard that bark. 6 months ago, I was a ghost in my own life. I was waiting to die because I thought that was all I had left to do. But I was wrong. I stood up and walked down the porch steps to the garden. I knelt in the dirt, feeling the cool earth in my hands. I pulled a weed from the rose bush. I am 70 years old. My hearing is back. My mind is sharp. And my life is just beginning. I want to say something to you, the women watching this. Maybe you are like me. Maybe you have worked hard your whole life. Maybe you have raised children who you love more than breath itself. And maybe, just maybe, you feel like you are starting to disappear. You might feel like people talk over you. You might feel like your family thinks they know what's best for you. You might feel like you are just grandma or mom and not a person with rights and dreams. Don't let them do it. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it is. If you feel like you are being managed instead of loved, pay attention. Do not hand over your power just to keep the peace. Peace built on submission isn't peace. It's surrender. Keep your name on the deed. Keep your signature on the checkbook. Make them earn your trust every single day. You are not expired. You are not a burden. You are the matriarch. You are the queen. And a queen never lets the subjects steal the throne while she is still sitting on it. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my knees. I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. The birds were singing in the oak tree, a complicated, beautiful melody that I will never take for granted again. I walked back toward the house. My house. I grabbed the car keys from the hook by the door. I think I'll go for a drive. Maybe I'll go to the mountains. Maybe I'll go to the museum. Maybe I'll just drive with the windows down and the radio up, because I can. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.